My name is Average Joe, and I'm a proud geek with expertise in movies, superheroes, and animation.
My name is Beef Pork Ribs. I'm a fine repository of esoteric knowledge, which I suppose most people would qualify as geeky. Though I dabble in many fandoms, my main areas of expertise are anime, movies, and Belgian comics, with a strong recent insurgency of D&D.
Our mission is to bring nerd and geek culture to the masses
by sticking it all under the microscope.
Welcome to the Bat Jar Podcast.
Movies, comics, graphic novels, TV, cartoons, animation, nerds are geeks, entertainment culture. Hear it on the Bat Jar, Nerdy Power. Nerds and geeks, come gather around the scene. Come and join us in the Bat Jar. Come and tune into Average Joe and his team. Lots of room here in the Bat Jar. When the newest nerdy news drops, these podcast pals put it under the scope. DC, Marvel, Disney, Star Wars, cinematic, multiverse. It's mega Christmas, strangest franchise. Hear it on the Bat Jar, Nerdy Power.
Hello there, and welcome to the Bat Jar Podcast, where we put nerd and geek culture under the microscope.
And we do it from wherever we may be, because we are a dedicated podcast, or because we're getting busier schedule and realizing it's harder to be a podcaster than I thought at first. This is really humbling experience in the in my life right now.
So you're traveling right now, correct?
Yes, I'm coming to you directly from a hotel. You know those little business center that have one computer in them? That's where I am right now.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, nothing but the finest for us.
Well, I mean, we have it set up so we can't see each other. So if you told me you were at home right now, I would have believed you.
Oh, well, there you go. Perfect. No, it's just a little bit earlier in the morning local time, but not really. But I've only been here for one day, so I'm fine.
Gosh, yeah. I mean, it is the summer. With my job right now, I don't get a lot of holidays in the summer. I take most of my vacation other times of the year, but I did get to go to Prince Edward Island last weekend. Tater Tot and I had an engagement party with her family, which was super fun. And it was hard to leave once the weekend was over. It's like, oh man, I gotta go back to work.
Yeah, PEI is a beautiful place. I have been there several times in my youth. Not recently, but when I was young, we went to 2 or 3 times for summer holidays. Once rented a cottage with family friends for the, few weeks of summer because there were good holidays because our friends' parents were teachers, and we had taken a bigger holiday that year. It was very nice. Very, very quiet Prince Edward Island, but like in the kind of good way.
Well, I don't know if I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but as a hobby, I host pub trivia.
I was aware of this, but probably because I went with you once or twice.
That's right, yeah. So it's pretty easy. Basically, this guy here in Ottawa, it's his business, the Ottawa Trivia League, and there's about 30 different pubs across the city that pay him money to have trivia happen in their bars once a week. And then he hosts a lot of the trivia nights himself, but then he has people like me who basically go on his behalf. So he sends us all the music files we need. He sends us the script with all the questions and the game sheets for the players, and then we go and host it. It's a lot of fun. The reason why I bring it up is because there's a few questions from this past week that Beeper made me think of you. So I'm going to give you some trivia questions here.
Oh, fun. This is going to be a real original episode.
What is the best-selling manga series ever? It follows Monkey D. Luffy, whose body can mimic rubber after he eats the devil fruit.
I really didn't need that second part.
Is it Dragon Ball, Golgo 13, Naruto, or One Piece?
It's One Piece. Although Golgo 13 has been going on for a while and is doing, fairly well considering what it is. Dragon Ball Z historically was, at the time of its release, the best-selling manga. I don't think Naruto ever was, though, because it was competing pretty directly with One Piece throughout all of its run.
Hilariously, not many of the teams got that right.
Because really? I think it is literally the best-selling graphic novel, or the the single best-selling graphic novel in history,
I mean, most
and the
people were over
third
the age
best
of
series.
40, so.
Yeah, that's true.
But
So
here's a
probably
different
the only one
question.
they'd heard of was Dragon Ball Z.
What Nintendo console was meant for hotel rooms and airplanes? 3DS, Gateway, Switch, Wii U.
I'm guessing they're going for the DS because it's a portable one, but I've definitely seen. I don't know. I feel like you could put a Switch in an airplane fairly easily.
Apparently, the correct answer is the Nintendo Gateway, which I've never heard of before.
Oh, is it kind of like the vision? Not the vision. The Virtual Boy. It was this one thing that Nintendo made, and that was super innovative, but nobody was ready for. And
Yeah, I
was it
mean,
maybe
the way the
the
questions were, just like was meant for hotel rooms, so perhaps it was developed, never actually released because it just didn't work.
that's possible? Because I do remember, back in the day, there were N64s in hotel rooms, right?
I don't think I ever got to see that. What the heck?
Really? Oh, it was around the same time that they were in every McDonald's as well. But like, yeah, there were some hotel rooms that had N64s in them, and you could like use the controller to change the channel.
Okay, here we go. Here's the next question. This is a question. It's called movie title mashup.
Okay.
So the idea is I give you a description of a movie that's clearly like two other movies shoved together, and you need to give me the movie title that is like the portmanteau of both movie titles.
Okay.
For example, if I said government agents looked for aliens in Wakanda, the answer would be Men in Black Panther.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So here's this hypothetical movie. Macaulay Culkins from throughout the multiverse team up to set sticky traps for bumbling but superpowered thieves.
Home Alone Madness.
Spider-Man No Way Home Alone.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, and here's the last question I'll give you. This die is rarely used in D&D, although it is the hit die for barbarians. In geometry, it's called a dodecahedron. How many
12.
sides does it have?
12.
Wow, you knew that instantly. I knew you would.
Well, yeah, the barbarians are the only class that use a D12 as a hit dice, or at least in recent editions. I don't know how it was in the past, because in the past the wizards' hit dice used to be a D4. Now it's a D6, which is slightly more reasonable, but yeah, getting one D4 HP every level is not a great thing. And yeah, the D12 is seldom used because it's a hit dice for barbarian. Very few spells use it because it's a very highly variable dice. There's like one warlock signature spell that uses it, and then usually the only weapons that would use a D12 are again weapons that barbarians would use, so like the great axe, and I think there's one other, but I don't remember.
So there you go. There's a little preview of what pub trivia could look like. I mean, there are questions in there from this past week about like history and geography and science and math. Like it's not just pop culture, but those were the questions that made me think of you, Beeper, because I was like, oh, if he was here, he would know the answer.
Well, mostly.
Now, it's been a few weeks since we last had an episode. We took last week off. I don't know. Have you and Mjolnir been watching Ms. Marvel?
A little bit, yes. I think. How many episodes does it have total?
6.
Okay, so we're about halfway through it. Maybe a little. I think we watched episode 4.
Okay. Yeah, I watched it with Tater Tot, and
I'm vaguely aware that they mention mutants.
Well, that. Do you want spoilers?
I mean, I don't mind, but it seems like there was some kind of announcement this weekend as well that mutants are finally entering the MCU.
Yes, I learned that apparently there's some. Even though Disney now has the rights to all the X-Men stuff, apparently if they make anything before 2025, then they have to give money to the producers who were involved.
Don't they also
X-Men
need
movies
to
previously?
use the actors that are?
Yeah, so it's like
Apparently,
they're
yeah.
intentionally kind of waiting off on, just so that they don't have to give previous director or producers and actors money. Which, fair enough.
Yeah, I do hope they keep some of the actors though from the previous movies because like there were some good performances despite some of the movies being terrible.
Yeah, like Michael Fassbender, he's just getting older, so he's getting closer to.
Yeah,
He's just like Ewan McGregor. He's just aging up into the role.
exactly. Um, but also aging a little bit too slowly to fully take it over as it originally appeared. But we'll waive that point.
We'll talk about Ms. Marvel eventually. I was just curious if you'd seen it all yet.
Yeah, I think we will have to have an episode on that one. It's been interesting for not just the show, but kind of its release and what happened to it. Are things that are worth talking about.
And I'm going to take a shot in the dark and say you have not gone to see DC League of Super Pets.
I have not. Who knows? Maybe I will, but it's been a busy summer. But after this trip is done, I don't have anything specific to do, so I might be able to get to see movies a bit more.
I mean, Tater Tot and I saw it last weekend at a drive-in, and I enjoyed it. She didn't hate it. It's a weird movie in the sense that the story is pretty like simple. Like it's clearly a movie meant for kids in terms of the narrative, but then some of the jokes and some of the humor, it's like fairly adult, I would say. And so it walks into that, who is this movie made for? Like, who is your target audience? Like, there's characters who swear, and then they're censored, like they beep their lines out.
I see.
And it's like, wow, that's a strong choice for like a family movie.
Yeah, I've got questions about it, but I think maybe we should get into the theme of today before I get to it, because I feel like there's aspects of this movie that may be important for our discussion today.
Yeah, so originally this episode was going to be talking about the Scooby-Doo franchise, but there's been a couple. It's a sad week to be a DC fan, I must say. A couple of things have happened that are just not the best, and so I've asked Beeper if we could basically push Scooby and the gang a week ahead to really dive into what's happened in the world of DC this week. Two major things that happened kind of within the same time, and it's all kind of related to the same reality. The first thing was that they have finally canceled The Flash, the show that has been on the CW now for 9 years. This final season will be its last. And then kind of out of nowhere, they canceled the Batgirl movie, which was in post-production at the time that they canceled it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a strange thing. Like I do understand some of the reasons behind it, but not fully. So I'm sure you'll illuminate me on some of the things. But I just remember yesterday seeing a post on Facebook from a friend of mine who is a pretty big DC fan. But it was something to the extent that the people who are most upset about the Batgirl thing being canceled are Brendan Fraser fans.
Yeah, so I mean, we've talked about this a bit on the show, that Warner Brothers has been kind of changing hands. Warner Brothers is kind of like a foster child, really. It's been moving from home to home the last 4, 5, 6 years. Because it was originally its own thing, or no, it was owned by Time Warner, and then it was sold to AT&T, and became Warner Media, and then it was sold and merged with Discovery, and so now the company is called Warner Brothers Discovery. So, people naturally, like at least I will naturally compare DC and Marvel, and you look at their home lives, if you will. Marvel has had the same home now for 14 years since Disney purchased Marvel.
Yeah.
Whereas DC has changed homes. This will be its third move in as much time.
Yeah, and also even before, like, I feel like it was like when Marvel was purchased, it was for the sake of Marvel. It wasn't kind of with other things. It was like a direct acquisition by Disney, so it was a lot more of like, if we're following that analogy, they they Disney adopted Marvel, whereas like the DC was kind of adopted as a sibling. They was like you had to adopt the two siblings together, and it was kind of like the little brother that they weren't sure if they really wanted. That's a terrible analogy, and a grim look at the way that some of our systems work for children, but a good way to, I think, to describe what's happened to the DCEU and kind of DC as a whole recently.
Could we compare them to the kids from the Lemony Snicket series of unfortunate events?
Oh,
Like DC is like one of
yeah.
the kids, and amongst like Warner Brothers and HBO and like the other things that are owned by or would have been owned by Warner Brothers.
Yeah, the only problem is because I have recently watched a series of Unfortunate Event, having never read it. They did want all of the orphans together because all of them have to disappear and sign over the fortune.
But that's the thing, is that like Warner Brother, like DC is like it is kind of moving with all these other parts. It's
Okay,
not
yeah.
just.
So which of the three Baudelaires would you say that DC is?
Oh, who can say? Point is, I feel like we've had a lot of conversations being like, why is DC doing this? Or like, this doesn't make sense. Or why on earth would they have this fandom event and then have pretty much everything delayed? And you start to realize it's because things are not going well behind the scenes.
And then not have fandom the next year again.
They had it in 2021.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
It was just later.
Yeah, but they're not having it this year, right? Because Comic-Con is back, and so fandom is just kind of a weird substitute for it.
Yeah, and people have commented like Warner Brothers DC had a very like they had very little presence at Comic-Con. Like they had a panel, but The Rock kind of just took it over, dressed up as his Black Adam character, and there's seems like 1,000 different DC projects that have been announced, and there's been like no information about. So.
Yeah. Though to be fair, I mean, Marvel also announced like a million different things, and like they have followed through on some of them, but it is starting to cost them in some ways. And I think that might be worth talking about too in our comparison, but I think maybe we can do the announcements first and kind of go into those before going into maybe my thoughts on that overall.
Yeah, so the first thing that happened this week is that The Flash was canceled, and it'll have one more season. It'll have 13 episodes, which seems like a normal length of a television season for like maybe a streaming show, but for a network show like The Flash, which usually has anywhere between like 18 and 23 episodes, like 13 episodes is like a shorter season.
Yeah.
And this is significant because it basically means that the Arrowverse is officially dead, because The Flash was the last show that was part of the Arrowverse that was still running.
Yeah, that's a sad thing, but I still think that like it's one of those sad but nostalgic, because I think in a certain way it is probably going to get people to look back on it and be like, oh yeah, this is like one of the best things DC had done, and we should maybe, look at why it was canceled, and maybe, especially with other DC projects going not the way that fans wanted, push a little bit to be like, yeah, no, we want this we want more of things like this, and it might get a resurgence on streaming that might do something. Who knows what resurgence on streamings does anymore these days, but it could be a good thing overall, like in a sense that it's completely dead, because then people will start looking back on it fondly.
Now, you don't watch The Flash, correct?
No, I haven't watched any of the Arrowverse show.
Oh, okay. So it's obviously a much sadder thing for me to get this news than it is for you.
Yes, for sure.
this has been kind of like the writing has been on the wall for this for a while now, because some people will say The Flash hasn't been good, like hasn't been a good show in like 3 or 4 years now. Some people will say it hasn't been good since its second season, but really the Arrowverse has basically been on a decline since the start of the pandemic. And it's just coincidence that they had their big Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover aired in two chunks, one in like December of 2019 and then again in January 2020. And that crossover included like 5 TV shows that were all on at the same time. It included actors from previous DC TV shows. It really felt like a celebration of DC TV as a whole. And then it bled into like the final couple episodes of Arrow, the show that started this whole connected universe. It had its final episode in February 2020. And it really seemed like the way that the crossover ended, it's like they're forming the Justice League and all these characters are sitting around a table together. And it's like, yeah, like you're just getting started, you know, all these characters from different shows are together. And then slowly but surely, more and more of the shows start getting canceled. So, you know, at its prime, there were like 6 different Arrowverse shows all on the same network. They didn't all air at the same time, but they were all like active shows. And then one by one, they just started getting canceled. And you start to realize it's not just because of low ratings. It's because Warner Brothers is being purchased. The CW is not a network that is owned entirely by Warner Brothers. It's like a shared venture. They're really trying to push the HBO Max streaming service. So naturally they're putting more focus on creating content for that. And so it just no longer became a business priority to create content that you didn't really get all the profits for. It's the same reason the Marvel Netflix shows kind of passed away. And, you know, there's a bit of revival there with Daredevil Born Again, but The Flash was kind of like the last runner in the race, no pun intended. There is this Superman and Lois show that's on right now, and it seemed like it was going to be part of the Arrowverse because it has actors who played Superman and Lois in the Arrowverse, but they've made it very clear recently that it takes place on a different Earth. So it's basically like separated from the rest. And then there's a show called Stargirl, which again, actors who have been on The Flash have shown up on Stargirl, but as like different versions from different universes. So effectively, the reality of the shared universe is ending with The Flash, and it's because the people in charge they want to make shows that they get all the money for, basically.
Yeah. Which is, I don't know, I think it is kind of unfortunate that, like, they didn't I mean, I guess it would have been difficult, but, you know, it almost seems like migrating the shows to their streaming platform would have been the way to go, you know, kind of the way Disney is kind of doing things. Like, I know they, like, you know, Daredevil got a slight revival, and that's on Netflix rather than Disney Plus. But they, you know, that was partially just because that show did so very well that they decided to keep it. And I feel like obviously DC did not go that way, but it happened earlier, so maybe they weren't sure that this would happen because this, like, you know, nobody could have seen the pandemic happening, because I'm sure if people had, you know, migrating to a streaming platform would have been the best idea ever for these shows. But that wasn't what was happening. And so it kind of also killed what was already dying in that sense as well.
And that's another part of the problem, is that years ago, the CW signed an exclusive streaming agreement with Netflix, basically saying like all their shows would stream on Netflix in the United States. So not only is, you know, Warner Brothers was in this position where they were making shows that weren't entirely their own because it's on a shared network, but they also wouldn't be able to use them for their streaming platform because there was like this locked in deal with Netflix.
Yeah, and that's again when we talk about it's becoming a harder and harder to um, disassociate to separate the bad things that are happening to the DCEU and the bad business decisions that happen because it might have not seemed like a terrible business decision at the time, but that wasn't going exclusive with the streaming service. A few years ago wasn't crazy because Netflix was basically the only thing, but now you're like, oh, that was in hindsight that was a bad decision.
Yeah, and then this bleeds into the reality that it was just announced the other day that with Warner Brothers Discovery kind of inheriting the HBO Max streaming service, which if you guys don't remember, AT&T purchased Warner Brothers because they wanted to create a streaming service that they could sell with their phones. Because in the US, unlimited data is a thing, and HBO Max has never really, as a streaming service, hit the potential of what people want to do. It doesn't chart, like none of their original shows make it into the top 10 like ratings for Nielsen. It has not been successful. So it was announced this week that starting in 2023, they're actually going to merge HBO Max and Discovery Plus into a new streaming service that will have a different name and a different, like it'll be like it's going through a total rebrand again. And I have to laugh because shows like Titans, that started on the DC Universe streaming service, which ended up being folded into HBO Max, which is now being folded into something else.
Yeah, it almost feels like it's getting into the sunk cost fallacy, where it's like, no, this is going to have to eventually work instead of, you know, instead of focusing on making the one thing you have better, you keep trying to modify it like afterwards in order to match what is happening elsewhere. And that usually tends to not work. But, again, business decisions.
Yeah, so the new guy in charge of Warner Brothers Discovery, his name is David Zaslav, and he is very committed to having a unified vision for his like franchises, his brands, and he's very committed to basically having a unified vision for DC. So on a certain level, I can understand that if his vision of what DC needs to look like doesn't match the Arrowverse or the HBO Max shows or the movies or whatever other stuff they're doing, I can appreciate the desire to have everything be under a unified vision, because previously they've been really leaning into this, it's the multiverse, so everything looks different, and there's a reason why there's Nightwing on the Harley Quinn show, but then Nightwing's also on Titans, but then also he's in this video game, and they all look different. They're all different versions.
Yeah. The thing is, they kind of have to. I think it would be in their best interest to. And again, this kind of goes into things I wanted to talk about, like DC versus Marvel, or DC and Marvel compared to one another. And if that is what they're doing, I think that they definitely need to do a better job than what Marvel has been doing as far as having a united vision, right? Or a unified vision, right? Because in one of the things that is plaguing Marvel right now is that there seems to be a only semi unified vision where there's a lot of terms get thrown around that are contradictory to each other from different movies that make kind of the multiverse and the alternate realities and alternate universe. All of these things are being merged together into one kind of big mess instead of having a coherent vision. And as more and more shows are coming out, it's becoming harder to follow, and I think it is starting to be to the detriment of Marvel. And I think if DC can find a good way to balance it, that is part of their ticket into being able to match Marvel once again to some degree.
Yeah, apparently David Zaslav wants to have a 10-year plan for DC.
Yeah. I mean, and that's, a good thing to have. It just has to, it has to be a coherent vision, but also just like be closer to what, phase 2 of Marvel was than what phase 5 is.
Yeah. So this brings into the second major thing that happened. It was announced that the Batgirl movie, which was announced, a long time ago, or not a long, like whatever, a while ago, as it was going to be a streaming movie for HBO Max, has been shelved. It's currently in post-production, like the directors are in the editing stage, and it's never going to be released. David Zaslav has decided that this Batgirl movie does not it does not match the vision for what they have to say. So like the Warner Brothers spokesperson says, quote, "The decision to not release Batgirl reflects our leadership's strategic shift as it relates to the DC universe and HBO Max. Leslie Grace, the actress who would have played Batgirl, is an incredibly talented actor, and this decision is not a reflection of her performance." End quote.
Yeah, I don't know, because I've also seen like people speculating that there were more fiscal reasons as to why it was canceled, and that it had more to do with them not believing that it would be able to generate enough profit. There was a lot of there were some people kind of mirroring the producers in some of these discussions, but at the same time, you have to think that there probably are layers of reasons why this is happening. But it does seem kind of.
Were you even aware this movie was being made?
No, I wasn't aware of it. Like, I knew the Batgirl series was having a rocky road. I think I may have heard at some point that they were making a movie, and it sounded like a last-ditch effort to kind of save it. But that's the thing. And yeah, that does go into the, terrible marketing is on top of everything. But it does seem kind of sad to have a film, that's in post-production and then gets canceled, and probably gets more press release from being canceled than it originally did. Which, I don't know, maybe they're going to reverse sweep it and be like, just kidding, we just wanted the fans to clamor. But that's also not a great publicity ploy either, I think.
Now, I was very sad to see this because I have been following this movie's production fairly closely. Even when it was first announced, I was like, "Ooh, that's cool!" Like I'm actually like Batgirl as a character, whether it's Barbara Gordon or Stephanie Brown or even Cassandra Cain, because the mantle of Batgirl has changed over a few times. I've really enjoyed reading those comic books, and I found like they announced that the movie was going to be inspired by Batgirl Year One, which is like a mini series that was released in the early 2000s, and I've actually read it. I got it from the library, and I was like, "Yeah, that's a really great story. It'd be so cool for them to make it." And they made the interesting choice to cast Leslie Grace, who is an African-American actress, to play Barbara Gordon, who is traditionally portrayed as a Caucasian redhead. So I was, and then they released like a photo of her in the costume, and it was clearly inspired by they call it the Batgirl of Burnside, where it's a very practical outfit that's mostly like a leather jacket and like hiking boots. So I was like, okay, they're drawing inspiration from like some of the newer comics and some of the Batgirl Year One stuff. it was announced that Brendan Fraser was going to be in the movie as Firefly, who's like a DC villain. That I'm like, yeah, that sounds like and Firefly is like connected to the origins of Batgirl, so it's like, oh, it makes sense that he would be there. It was announced that J.K. Simmons would be reprising his role from Justice League as Commissioner Gordon, which is like, okay, I guess this must be part of like the the Snyderverse, because if he's there, then it's the same version. And then it was announced that Michael Keaton would be Batman in it, and I was like, what the heck? Like, how does that make sense? And I think the release date for this was supposed to be post The Flash, where of course Michael Keaton's supposed to come back as Batman. So there had been rumors that like, oh, after The Flash, the universe will reset and it'll be a world where Michael Keaton is Batman and not Ben Affleck.
Yeah,
so
which I
was
I'm
very
always
excited.
in
Like, to be
for, but
frank,
yeah. Sorry, go for it.
no, it's okay. Anyway, there were a lot of things that had me very interested in this movie, and to hear that I'll never get to see it it sucks.
Never say never, especially when DC is concerned.
Are you
Like
saying
there.
that a Snyder cut kind of thing will come later?
Well, it's kind of what I was alluding to earlier. I am almost afraid that DC is trying to get the fans to get upset so that they can create more buzz around something. There's a very cynical part of me that thinks that might be happening. But it also just might happen because DC fans are, desperately latching on to anything that comes, our way, because there has been so little unified vision and so little things happening that, people are asking for more and wanting more. And, like, no matter how you feel about the production, like with those actors in that movie, you're going to have at least good scenes, regardless of anything else that's going on around the production, right? So it does seem kind of weird to still, like, because that's also, like, a fair amount of money invested in it, too. Like, I know Brendan Fraser isn't the A-lister he once was, and, like, Michael Keaton either, but J.K. Simmons is still a very big name, and Michael Keaton coming back as Batman is a very big thing, and I think something that I'm not the only one who's excited about that.
Yeah, apparently the movie cost $70 million to make, and then when you count for like COVID related reshoots that had to happen, it's like the cost of the movie is about $90 million. So I've heard there's one rumor
movie that's very reasonable.
Yeah, so there's one rumor that by canceling this movie, like there's some kind of tax credit that Warner Brothers Discovery can get to basically like save themselves some money.
Yeah.
Another element to this is that part of David Zaslav's vision for Warner Brothers Discovery is that they want to focus more on theatrical films and like TV and not streaming movies. Like he's like his vision for streaming is not to spend money making movies just for streaming. It's like, if we're going to make movies, they're going to go to theaters.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that it's, something that would be good. And also, going back to strengths and just, I mean, DC kind of needs a reset. And one of the ways to do that probably is through theatrical releases to get more buzz around their shows. Like if that Batgirl movie had come out before the first, how many seasons? Were 2 or 3 seasons that did really poorly on streaming? Maybe you would have reversed that and instead, gotten a lot of hype around the movie and then gotten the shows to come in. And I really think that, especially in the current climate of things, and that's the thing I wanted to kind of talk about, quality over quantity, right? Because I think, beyond the general MCU fatigue, I think that right now Disney as a whole is kind of facing that, not just with Marvel, but with Star Wars as well, and with other branches, that they're just releasing so many things so quickly. Not only like, I guess we'll probably, we'll talk about it when we talk about Ms. Marvel, but like some of their shows are actually cannibalizing each other, and some of the things are being released so quickly that there's other issues that are happening with production teams and post production, and it's just so much happening that you are eventually going to see on some level some kind of a quality drop. And I think the best way to try to compete with a company or a franchise that has gone into that mode of just churning out things as quickly as possible is to start really focusing on making quality products, to kind of remind people that there are still things that are worth waiting for. Because I think that is, even within streaming services, like streaming series, some of the series that do the best are series that did take their time and are kind of trying to bring in more of a spectacle. Like The Boys is still doing very well on Amazon Prime, and like Stranger Things took its time. It wasn't necessarily entirely intentional, but it is still kind of happening. It's not being as rushed into creation, and I think that is still paying off, even with, because eventually when you get bombarded by tons of content, you're going to have something special, and you can either make it a gimmick, or you can make it the fact that there was a lot of effort and thought, and love put into a project. And I think that's the way to go.
I get that, like quality over quantity, but it's like, why can't they just throw it up on HBO Max? Like, don't even market it. Just put it out there. It's not like it's gonna.
I agree that
like,
DC
how bad is this movie?
Is going a little too far in that direction. Like, I think that they should still, they don't have enough stuff, so they should still release the things that they have made. Like, I don't think that necessarily applies to Batgirl. I think that just applies to DC as a whole right now.
Yeah. Although I'm thinking about it, like New Mutants, Dark Phoenix, is like, I was an advocate for them not releasing those things because they were leading to nothing. So maybe they are making the right decision by, if like the Batgirl movie is not going to lead to anything else, maybe it does make sense to like not have it go out at all.
I don't know. I don't like that mentality. I enjoyed New Mutants for what it's worth. Like, it wasn't amazing, but I still enjoyed the movie, and I'm glad it was made and released, right? So like, wait, is New Mutants the one with the demon bear?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, I enjoy, like, partially because it was the first movie that I went to see in theaters in the pandemic era, but still, like, there were good things happening. Also, I'm a huge Maisie Williams fangirl, but
Wouldn't you be a fanboy?
I know what I said.
Okay. Apparently, this, like, the rumor is that the test screenings they've done for this Batgirl movie, like, was not received well. So like, part of me is not curious. I'm like, how bad is the movie? Like, how bad is this movie that they don't want us to see it?
Especially like on a $90 million budget for a superhero movie, for a DC movie, they must be really, really bad for that to be the financially viable decision to make.
And then, it's like, all right, I'll buy that you have this vision. This movie doesn't match that vision, and that's why you're not releasing or not putting it out. I get you want to focus on theatrical movies. I get that. But then the things you're choosing to keep on the docket, like they're really leaning into this Joker sequel that's a musical, and they confirm that Lady Gaga is going to be Harley Quinn, and I'm like, of all the DC things, I did not want a sequel to Joker, let alone one that's like a musical where Lady Gaga is Harley Quinn.
Yeah, I mean, that movie was good for what it was, but like, and again, it was a quality movie. It may have been like kind of tacked on to the DC universe, but like, it was a quality movie. It did well. Leave it at that.
And people are shaking their heads now because the Ezra Miller situation just keeps getting worse and worse, and that Flash movie was like, first put into development back in like 2018 or something. So it's like it's been long delayed. It's cost them a lot of money to make, and an actor who is super controversial right now is not only is he the lead character, they the lead character, but they have two roles in the movie as like different versions of Barry Allen.
Yeah, I mean, it's there. I remember listening to a podcast where they're just saying, yeah, they're just gonna CGI a mask over his face for everything, get some extras to come in and just CGI the mask, like retroactively make it cover more of his face. I think they could even. I think it would be interesting, or not interesting, funny, but don't do that because like visual effect artists already have a tough enough life. But just making it like the completely white eyes on the mask so that you can't really tell any features except a little bit the mouth, like in the cartoons, and just be done with it.
Yeah, like if you're gonna cancel Batgirl because it's that bad, like to keep, and don't get me wrong, like I want to be able to separate the artist from the art. I want to see this movie. I want to see
Yeah,
Michael Keaton come back as Batman. Um, and now another part that makes this confusing is that it was revealed recently that Ben Affleck came and filmed a cameo appearance for Aquaman 2, because there was supposed to be a cameo for Michael Keaton in Aquaman 2 where he like shows up as Bruce Wayne. Because if you remember originally, The Flash was supposed to come out this November, and
yeah.
then Aquaman was supposed to come out in December. So, we would have had this movie where Michael Keaton Batman debuts, reality changes, and then he's like the Batman of the DCEU. But now Flash is coming out next June, Aquaman's coming out in March, so now Aquaman comes out before Flash. So it doesn't make sense for Michael Keaton to be in.
Yeah, so it's still Affleck. Oh man, yeah, it's unfortunate.
Michael Keaton went from 3 appearances as Batman to now he's in 1.
Yeah, that makes me very sad.
I mean, the Aquaman thing was just a cameo, and it sounds
Yeah,
like
but
he didn't have a huge role in
it's
the Batgirl
still
movie.
you're still hacking it apart, right? And you're still changing your things at the last minute, and that very seldom actually works out. I just, you know what we need? We need a Shazam style um, Freakazoid movie and just throw it into Warner Brothers and just have him make fun of everybody and reset things.
Yeah. So
I'm
apparently
a,
Warner
I'm a
Brothers
big fan of
Discovery is still doing a bunch of layoffs, and like they're still like trying to find like $3 billion worth of savings, and like they're merging companies, they're merging their streaming services. So it sounds like they're committed to releasing in theaters Black Adam, which comes out in October now.
I mean, with the amount of fuss The Rock is making about it, they kind of have to.
And then Shazam Fury of the Gods is now coming out in December. And then Aquaman 2 comes out in March, and then The Flash. And it sounds like after those movies comes out, that's like throwing the papers in the air and starting over.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's this weird thing because, before the MCU, that would have been a completely normal thing for the comic book film industry to do. But now people are kind of expecting something more, and I don't know, you can either lean into that expectations or just be like, no, we're doing things, which I don't know. I guess they tried saying we're doing things and that didn't work out. So I guess now they're just going to try to copy Marvel and people will be upset about it. But I don't know. Maybe it'll work.
I mean, yeah, like I don't know what this new streaming service is gonna be like, but apparently it's gonna have less scripted content. So I'm like thinking, there's this Green Lantern show that's being made for HBO Max. Is that still gonna happen? Is that gonna get canceled too? And
Is that where the Harley Quinn animated show is going to be?
yeah, it's on HBO Max now, so
Okay.
it's like unclear. It's
Yeah.
like, will that get canceled? Will Titans
Hopefully not.
continue? Will Doom Patrol continue?
I really hope that they do at least separate the animated shows from the disaster that is the live action because like there's still hope for some of those.
Yeah, I mean, there's like that Batman Cape Crusader animated show with like Bruce Timm and
Are they
J.J.
still
Abrams,
making the
and
crossover Teen Titan movie?
they did, yeah, they made that years ago now. It
Really?
was it wasn't as good as it was originally
Clearly
hyped to
not,
be.
because I wasn't even aware it happened.
They now have a crossover movie with like the DC superhero girls with Teen Titans Go. You can see that as well.
Uh, that's less interesting to me.
Yeah. So anyway, it just sucks. There's no other way to the. I was excited to see this Batgirl movie. I've stuck with the Flash show all these years, and you can point to the decline in quality. You can point to the pandemic. You can point to the fact that they started making maybe too many shows and they had to spread all their talent thin. You can point towards the fact that perhaps network television shows and like trying to keep a drama series going for 20 plus episodes a year is like it's just too much.
Yeah.
So I'm sad that that's ending. I really hope that if with this ending, like they'll just bring Grant. I know it won't happen, but I'll say it. Like make Grant Gustin, who plays Barry Allen on the TV show, make him the movie Flash. I feel like that would
Yeah.
make a lot of people happy.
Honestly, I don't think that's beyond happening with the amount of money Ezra Miller's cost them and the amount of problems. I don't think that's beyond the realm of possibility.
Especially if the show's ended. Now the question is like, he's been playing the same role for almost 10 years, so is he going to want to like keep doing that? It's different from like Charlie Cox. Charlie Cox played Daredevil for like 3 years before his show was canceled. So for him
Yeah,
to
we
want to
played
come
it
back,
in Defenders, right? Too.
yeah, but that was during the same like 3-year period.
Oh, okay, I thought Defenders had a slightly longer run than Daredevil did.
No, Defenders was only like 8 episodes.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
it was
well,
released between the second and third seasons of Daredevil.
we'll see.
So yeah, I'm hopeful, and
Hopeful-ish.
hopeful-ish that he'll end up becoming the new Flash. And yeah, with Batgirl, I really, even if it's terrible, I would be fine if they just like slid it onto the streaming service. Like don't even market it. Like make it just like hide it in there so you have to go look for it. Because
Just
I
get
hope
the
they're wrong. I hope they aren't like doing this to like try and stir fans to action. Because I'm like that's just mean if that's the case.
Well, it's not even just mean, it's just problematic that is your go-to, that's where you're at. Like it's indicative of a bigger problem.
Right. And people I've watched said that can't just straight up canceling a movie like this and deciding it's not going to get released anywhere. It's like very unprecedented. There's not too many examples of this happening. So
The producers.
The producers, that's right. So like in his promos for Black Adam, The Rock kept saying the balance of power in the DC universe is about to change.
Yeah, I know. I still not sure I completely understand that statement because, like, I'm sorry, Superman's still Superman. But I did say that Mjolnir and I were talking about that line the other day, and like, look, I would love to see a movie where Dwayne Johnson and Henry Cavill duke it out. But like, hear me out. There's a Black Adam versus Superman wrestling match. And just as Superman looks like he's winning, the Peacemaker tags in.
I like it.
Basically, it's John Cena and Dwayne Johnson wrestling against Henry Cavill.
Yeah,
That's what I want to see. But with a little bit more costumes, and specifically with Dwayne Johnson, like, I'm never a big fan of The Rock, like, wrestling persona, but I think that the Peace Pigeon is close enough to John Cena's wrestling persona that it would work. And I mean, the Peacemaker. The Peacemaker definitely works as a wrestling persona, I think. So I think that it would be great.
Yeah. So anyway, David Zaslav, you are making some big moves, my friends. We're not friends. I'm not really talking to you. I don't know you, but You're making some big moves, and I hope this pays off. I hope that, 5 years from now, I can say, you know what, he was right to make those decisions in 2022 because I'm happy with what we have now. That's what I hope future me will be able to say.
I wish it for future you as well.
If you want to reach the show, you can send us an email at
batjarpodcast@gmail.com.
or you can tweet us at
The Bat Cookie Jar.
You can find the Bat Jar Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, including YouTube, because we got a channel. Share our posts on Facebook, write reviews, give our shows a rating. This will help all people join us inside the Bat Jar, and we appreciate it dearly.
And then to kind of like tie it up in a bow and connect it to next week's episode, the other project that was canceled alongside Batgirl was a sequel to Scoob. It was going to be called Scoob Holiday Haunt.
How was that even considered? I remember Scoob was terrible and I hated it, but I think that was a pretty universal thing and it didn't make a lot of money, right?
Well, it did well enough that they've already, it sounds like it was like kind of the same level of production as Batgirl.
Well, I guess we're going to have to talk about that then. What makes Scooby-Doo so commercially viable that they keep making terrible movies and they keep making money?
Yeah. So I'm sure that makes you happy that they canceled the sequel to Scoob.
Absolutely. But it would make me happier if it was because they were starting a new Scooby-Doo animated series.
Well, again, who knows with HBO Max, because there is this show about Velma where Mindy Kaling plays Velma that's supposed to be made for HBO Max, but at this rate, who knows if it'll actually get released.
I don't want a spin-off. I want another Scooby-Doo series with a banging opening theme song and completely formulaic good times.
So come back to the Batchar podcast next time when we talk about the Scooby-Doo franchise for reals. And until that time, I'm Average Joe.
I'm Beef Pork Ribs.
Catch you on the flip side.
Let's split up and look for clues.